Sorry I'm not in block 2 right now. Just trying to get everything set up for the rally. But for any of my blocks watching this video is really great to kind of go over how we're going to solve systems with matrices, okay? And we're going to do this by hand, not with our calculator yet, okay? You are able to do this by hand. So just a little refresher from last class. So remember a matrix, we're just dealing with the numbers, right? We have the brackets on each side, and then an augmented matrix is where we write it where the line is right down the middle, where the equal signs would be. So our goal is to take this system, write it as an augmented matrix, and then manipulate that matrix with our different operations that we could do in order to get our augmented matrix in row echelon form. That way, when I go to row echelon form, remember, is the diagonal of ones here, and then the zeros completely below. The reason we want to get in row echelon is so when we go to write it back as a system, we already have z equals 4. And then you can easily solve for y. And then you could back substitute and easily find for x. So another way of solving everything we solved in chapter 7. So remember the 3 operations that we could do? We can swap rows. We can multiply a constant to a row. All right, but remember, if you want to, let's say you want to divide by 2, because everything's divisible by 2. Remember, that means you have to multiply the row by a half. And then we can also add 2 rows together. Now, the multiplying a constant is just to get them to match, like we did with eliminating variables with 3x3 systems. So we just multiply something to a certain row, and then we add them together. We usually multiply to the row that we just got the 1 in. Remember that before we add to replace a row. So this first example we did in class was looking at a matrix and messing around with the 3 different operations that we could do. So to swap rows, we took row 1 and row 2 from this original augmented matrix, and we just swapped where everything was. So now everything in row 1 is now in row 2, and everything in row 2 is in row 1. We can also multiply. So this really is them trying to divide by 3 to row 1, because everything's divisible by 3 if you see in the original row 1. But we're going to write it as multiplying by the reciprocal, 1/3. Then we can do addition of row 2 and row 3. We can add any 2 rows. But we're going to multiply 2 to row 2, because then it would make this match here, so that when I add them, I get that 0. Then 2 times 2 is 4, plus -3 is 1. 2 times -3 is -6, plus 4 is -2, and 2 times 5 is 10, plus -6 is 4. So these are the 3 different operations that we're going to do in order to take our system from the original matrix to that row echelon form. So remember, we skipped this because there was no reason for us to do this twice. You guys know what to do. So remember, solving systems, okay? To get that main diagonal of ones and then the zeros below. So okay, great. So I want to get this main diagonal of ones and the zeros below. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write my augmented matrix for the system. Okay, so take the system, get rid of the letters, and just write it as a matrix. Next, all this craziness right here is how we're going to take that matrix and manipulate it with those 3 operations in order to get it with that row echelon form. So remember, start column by column. Start in the top left corner and work your way across. So after we write as a matrix, we're going to get the 1 in the top corner. We could do that by swapping. We can do that by multiplying a constant to the row if everything's divisible by whatever's there. Okay. Then once we get that 1, sometimes it's already there for us. If so, great. One less thing for us to do. We're going to take that first row and we're going to use that row to make the zeros below right here. Okay, right here. So notice how I wrote in blue here, some constant k times row 1. So this is row 1, right? We're going to take that row 1 and multiply something to make whatever was originally here match it. And then I'm going to add the two equations together so that I can replace row 2. Same with row 3. I'm going to take something from row 1, I'm going to multiply it by a constant to make that match. And then I'm going to add them. So I get the 1 up top, then zeros below. Now that I got that perfect first column, I'm going to ignore that first row now, because if I mess with row 1 anymore, it could change that column. So I'm now just going to work on getting a 1 in row 2. Now you could get that 1 there by multiplying some constant to row 2, or you could swap rows 2 and rows 3 if you feel like row 3 is easier to get a 1 in that spot than row 2 is. After you get the 1, again, use that row, that second row where you just got the 1, to make the 0 below. Multiply some constant, choose that second row, and then add it to row 3 to make the 0. Then finally, I'm just going to get that final 1 in that bottom corner. Okay, that usually is done by multiplying some constant to row 3. Okay, now if we get fractions, that is fine. Okay, we have to be comfortable with fractions. However, if we can avoid fractions, it'll make everyone's lives easier. Okay, but sometimes, and you'll notice later on in some problems, we can't avoid fractions. Okay, so we have to get comfortable with them. So this is the one we did in class. Okay, we got 635 as an answer, so we wrote the system as a matrix. And in order to get a 1 in that top corner, I replaced row 1 with row 3. You could have also replaced row 1 and row 2 because row 2 also had a 1. So I just picked 1 and 3. I swapped and I wrote out exactly what I did. You guys need to do the same on the test and on all your homeworks and all that good stuff. You guys definitely hit it in your homework right now to the sub. So hopefully you did. And you have another homework assignment that will be due next class. So I swap row 1 and row 3, so I get the 1 up top. Now I'm using row 1. Okay, I'm not actually changing row 1, but I'm using row 1 to get the 0 here and here. I want to make the zeros below it. So luckily rows 1 and 2 already match, so I'm going to just do row 1 minus row 2. Row 1 and 3 don't match yet. Okay, the 1 and 3. So what I have to do is to row 1, I have to multiply a negative 3 and then add row 3. You could have also multiplied a positive 3 and then subtracted row 3. Either or will be just fine. And when I do that, my row 2 now will become 0, 2, 0, 6. And row 3 will become 0, negative 8, negative 4, negative 44. Now, something I decided to do, you don't have to do this. I noticed that my rows were perfectly divisible by something, okay? The more you could take out a greatest common factor and divide something, the smaller the numbers will get and the easier things will be for you.